If you earn so much money that, I think that your social security benefit does suffer. That happens today.
Well, what happened, they simply took a minority of the people, anyone who works for who draws a pension from the city, any government entity.
Military.
Yes, also, you're right. I most certainly would appreciate to see somebody take the bull by the horn and get that orchestrated and try to.
If you communicate with the officers so that we can become familiar with the issue, there's a lot of issues out there that frankly I just can't be familiar with everything.
One other thing I'd like to say, after listening to Mr. Blevins, I have to say 100% fully, as a disabled veteran myself, support what he said. I don't think there should be any further cuts to it.
All right, thanks. Yes, sir.
As I was driving up, I heard there's a bill coming through, I don't know exactly where it is, to defund public radio and Planned Parenthood, which is an excellent idea to defund Planned Parenthood, but why do they have to be together? Public radio and Planned Parenthood should be defunded, I believe, but not public radio.
Well, like you and I may differ on that. I don't know what why the government is sponsoring radio stations. I mean, I think if you want to have public radio yourself, I suggest you contribute to public radio. But tax this gentleman or myself, who never listened to it, never see it, I'm being taxed to support it. I don't know that I really want that to happen. Excuse me. So the government has certain functions that we should be paying for to provide for our common defense, and I'm not sure if public radio is something that's necessary for our government to function.
Well, that's probably right, but Planned Parenthood should be defunded, I believe.
Well, I don't see that's an abortion type of issue.
Yeah.
I don't believe in.
You're
I'm
in
against
favor of
abortion, and I don't believe that we should be funding abortion.
I agree.
And I'm against that as well.
Right.
But I think the majority of people in Michigan's first district feel that way, and I voted that way.
Back to the Train Act. You voted for that, correct?
Right.
Why?
Are you aware what the Train Act does?
Yes.
The Train Act, as I mentioned before, puts a commission together to evaluate the cost of regulations written by the EPA. Because now there is no evaluation of the cost that these regulations incur on municipalities and individuals and people in general. And I believe that the cost of implementing a regulation should be known before the regulation is issued. Don't you think?
In other words, if you're talking about health and life, you're going to put a price on it, right? It's going to cost too much to do this to the air and do something to the clean air standards when you as a physician know perfectly well that this has to do with health and life. But it's money first?
Everything costs money.
Yes.
All right, so it's always a consideration when you're doing government, what it costs. You can't do anything without evaluating what it costs.
That's right.
So, I want clean air and clean water, okay? But, am I willing to get 0.1% improvement by paying $20 a gallon for gasoline? Is it worth it to our economy to be paying $20 a gallon for gasoline for increasing your electric bill 20 times?
How
To
many
get
lives is it
1%,
worth, right?
1/10 of improvement in the quality. Those are the type of things that we have to consider because it costs everybody money to be in these
save
evaluations.
I'm a manufacturer, and I have a paper mill on a river. And we've been having regulations for generations, since that thing's been there. And we believe that we need to put the water back the way we found it, the air, the way we found it, So we spend a lot of money, and we factor that into, we know what it costs. We factor that into what it costs us to do. As far as regulations go, we understand, there's some stupid ones, and we'll argue with them, and we have. But I don't want to get into competition with somebody who doesn't have to, who doesn't have that same mindset, who now says, there's no regulations in the air, there's no regulations in the water, I can make this stuff a lot cheaper, so I'll just dirty up the water. It's a race to the bottom. Now I got to compete with that guy? So I would say that it's up to me in the private world to figure out what this is going to cost, factor that into my pricing, and then go out and compete. We've been doing that for a long time, and it works. Stay out of it. Leave the regulations, and I agree with this lady that we don't want to get people sick downstream, and we don't want to get people sick in the area. So those costs are just far greater. I think you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, what I mean is that, the regulations change from year to year. You need stability in the regulations. If you invest, $1 million to do something to your factory, then the next year they change the regulations, so you know what I mean? There's a lot of difficulty with that.
Where is that happening?
Pardon me?
Where is that happening?
Well, that happens, all the time with the EPA.
For example?
Well, right here in Drummond Island, the quarry, they changed the regulations. We're through there where, they've had, like their OSHA regulations change every every other year. There's somebody's coming in with a new OSHA regulation, where they have a facility that does a certain process, and it's been the same process has been going on there for 20 years. All of a sudden this year, they're giving them a fine for this condition where this, the way the factory is running. They say it's unsafe this year, whereas for the last 20 years it's been safe. Instead of getting them a notice to change, in condition, they're getting them a $5,000 fine. So, that happens.
I would certainly hope that we are moving forward in our science to discover what is affecting people. And as we discover this is affecting this part of life, we'll do something about it, so the regulations have to change. We certainly aren't going to want the same regulations on air and water that we had 30 years ago. We've discovered more now.
Well, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
That's
But
what changes.
I think there needs to be oversight to that process. See, what's happening now is that these regulators, they write the regulations without oversight from Congress. I mean, the legislation that we pass in Congress is sometimes very vague, okay? And then a bureaucrat can change the regulations, depending on who the guy that's there is. And I think we need to have more oversight so that it complies with, the will of the people, rather than some bureaucrat who decides to change the rules and cost people money.
Who's the bureaucrat you're talking about here?
Congressman, you get time for one more question.
Okay. Well, these different agencies in Washington.
You mean the people that are using scientific evidence to discover things that are happening? That's a bureaucrat, and using that intelligence to formulate rules to protect our lives.
You say that, but for example, I'll give you an example of the stuff that happens. I sit on the Science and Space and Technology Committee, and there is an issue, what they call fracking, okay, where they crack the ground to get oil and gas out of the ground, okay? So the agency that oversees this fracking, there's a scientific panel appointed to study it. Well, none of the people on the panel have any experience with fracking. The people that are supposed to scientifically evaluate the fracking, the commission, those people have never done a fracking job and never been to a fracking job. And they're the ones that are deciding if it's scientifically safe or not. So, you trust that science? I mean, I'm a general surgeon, and I certainly don't want a pediatrician evaluating the stuff that I do. I want somebody that knows general surgery to evaluate what I'm doing.
I would assume these people are looking at evidence. I think there's been enough evidence on television and radio about what has happened about fracking. And the fracking is just for gas. I didn't think it was for oil. Maybe I'm mistaken. But the people who are making the money off this should not be the ones that are making the rules. The people who
Well,
are making the
I
money
agree
off
with
of it
you.
are the ones that are doing it and making the money.
I agree with you, but
Okay.
don't you think you want somebody who knows the business to be making the evaluation?
Why can't they all work together? You have
Because
the
I think a
science-
lot of it's politically done. Because the administration wants a certain answer, so they appoint the people that will give them that answer.
Yep, the people that are making the money off it.
All right, I'm out of time. I appreciate you coming and answering, asking me questions. Feel free to contact the office, and I'm happy to be available for it.
Thank you.
I'll be around for a little bit, so if needs to. I'll be here for
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Yes. I'll be back in 30 seconds. I'll be right with you.
Thanks for coming down, I appreciate your input.
Thank you very much.
It's not as clear cut as you think.
What's that?
And I know how to, and you need to have peer review.
Too long.
Okay.
Thank you, thanks for the invite. I will be.
They won't be working for us. They put them through college.
Oh, I see.
So now the community's gonna suffer, because who knows what that young man may or may not have done.
Oh, I know this.
Oh, I would be okay. That's awesome.